Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to explore a very unusual historical legacy. It is not an ancient relic, nor is it a jade seal symbolizing imperial authority. Instead, it is a human body, one permanently imprisoned in time by modern preservation technology. For more than half a century, countless pairs of eyes have peered through glass to gaze upon it. Yet in direct contradiction to the man's own final wish to be cremated, this body still lies today in a crystal coffin at the very center of Tiananmen Square, maintained each year through extraordinarily expensive and almost ritualistic procedures. In this documentary, we will uncover how this immortal body was created, and we will confront a deeper historical paradox: why regimes that openly proclaim their devotion to materialism ultimately choose to preserve their leaders in such an intensely unnatural form, transforming them into eternal relics instead of allowing them to return quietly to the earth. To understand this mystery, we must move the clock of history back to Moscow in 1924. The preservation of a leader's body was not a Chinese invention at all. It was a direct replica of a political tradition first established in the Soviet Union. On January 21, 1924, the heart of Vladimir Lenin stopped beating. For the young Soviet state, still struggling to establish its authority after the chaos of revolution and civil war, the loss of Lenin was like an earthquake of spiritual magnitude. Within the Communist Party leadership at the time, figures such as Leon Trotsky supported the wishes of Lenin's widow Nadezhda Krupskaya, who believed Lenin should simply be buried according to ordinary custom. But one man perceived the moment very differently. Joseph Stalin, who had once studied at the Orthodox Theological Seminary in Tbilisi, immediately sensed an extraordinary political opportunity. The Soviet regime had just violently dismantled the traditional religious world of Russia. Icons had been smashed, churches closed, priests persecuted. Yet in destroying the old faith, the state had created a vast spiritual vacuum among the population. When people were no longer permitted to believe in God or Christ, whom were they supposed to believe in instead? Stalin offered a replacement. The people, he argued, needed a new sacred symbol. And the perfectly preserved body of the revolutionary teacher would become the ultimate red relic of the new age. Overriding dissent within the party, Stalin pushed through the decision to preserve Lenin's body indefinitely. By personally overseeing and promoting this unprecedented project, he positioned himself as the supreme guardian of the ideology that would define the Soviet state. Soon afterward, a secret organization known as the Commission for Immortality was established in the Soviet Union. Its members included some of the most accomplished biologists, anatomists, and medical experts in the country. Their task was to use the cutting edge of modern science to achieve something that had previously existed only in myth: the physical immortality of a human body. The procedure began with the removal of most internal organs and the drainage of blood and bodily fluids. Through a highly sophisticated system of microinjections, specialists slowly infused the tissues with a carefully balanced chemical solution containing glycerol, potassium acetate, and other compounds. This solution preserved flexibility within the tissues and prevented the body from drying out or collapsing. But the process was never permanent. Each year the mausoleum must close for 1 or 2 months while experts perform detailed maintenance, reinforcing the preservative fluids, restoring delicate tissues, and replacing Lenin's specially tailored clothing. Over time, this extremely complex technical routine was presented to the Soviet public not merely as science but as a kind of ritual, one that quietly replaced the role once played by religious ceremonies. The message was unmistakable. The new socialist state possessed powers once attributed only to divine miracles. Once perfected, this technique quickly became something else: a replicable template for authoritarian power. It spread like an ideological blueprint across the socialist world, from Moscow to Hanoi, from Pyongyang to Beijing. Preserving the body of the supreme leader became a standardized political project designed to reinforce authority and cultivate an aura of reverence. Now we turn our attention to China. The preservation of Mao Zedong followed the Soviet script with striking precision, yet the story behind it was also shaped by an intense and uniquely Chinese struggle for power. Mao's death marked not only the end of an era but the beginning of a fierce political contest over what would become of his body. At 12:10 a.m. on September 9, 1976, Mao Zedong died. Inside the guarded compound of Zhongnanhai, grief filled the air, but beneath the surface of mourning lay something else, a suffocating tension created by the sudden vacuum of power. Whoever controlled Mao's funeral arrangements would effectively control the narrative of an entire historical era. At the center of this storm stood Hua Guofeng, Mao's designated successor during his final days. Hua's political position was far from secure. Above him stood powerful veteran leaders such as Yi Jianying and Li Xinyan, while beside him loomed the formidable political faction known as the Gang of Four, led by Mao's wife Jiang Qing. Hua's only claim to legitimacy rested on a single line reportedly written by Mao himself, "With you in charge, I am at ease." For Hua Guofeng, survival depended on a classic principle of Chinese political strategy, holding the emperor in order to command the princes. Even though Mao was dead, his authority could still exist in physical form. Preserving Mao's body permanently and constructing a grand memorial hall to house it would allow Hua to present himself as the rightful guardian of Mao's legacy. It was a political investment designed to stabilize the situation and intimidate rivals. On the opposite side of the political chessboard stood Jiang Qing and the Gang of Four. Historical records suggest that Jiang Qing was initially the most important high-level figure opposing the idea of preserving Mao's body. During early Politburo discussions, she insisted that Mao's own written support for cremation should be honored. But Jiang Qing's stance was far from purely moral, it was also deeply strategic. She believed herself to be the most authentic heir to Mao Zedong thought. In her view, a cremated Mao, leaving behind only his writings and ideological legacy, would strengthen her control over the interpretation of his ideas. If Mao existed only in texts and documents, she could claim authority over them. A physical body, displayed for public veneration, would become a political symbol outside her direct control. Yet, Jiang Qing quickly realized the danger of this position. In the feverish climate of the time, when the cult of personality surrounding Mao had reached almost religious intensity, advocating cremation could easily be portrayed by rivals as an act of disloyalty, even a form of anti-Mao behavior. Even more troubling, she eventually grasped a crucial truth. Whoever possessed Mao's body would possess the power to redefine Mao himself. Recognizing this, Jiang Qing abruptly shifted her position. She began advocating for the permanent preservation of Mao's remains, but insisted that the body should be kept inside Zhongnanhai, under her personal supervision. The final outcome is well known. Hua Guofeng quickly forged a political alliance with Yi Jianying and the veteran revolutionary leadership. Together they mobilized the majority of party forces and decisively overwhelmed the Gang of Four in the power struggle that followed. Soon afterward, the Politburo convened an emergency meeting. A resolution to permanently preserve Mao's body, construct a crystal coffin, and build a grand mausoleum was passed with astonishing speed. Through this decision, Hua Guofeng secured a crucial advantage in the battle for power, and Mao Zedong's body, against his own wishes, became the physical cornerstone of a new political order. Yet political victories often come with hidden costs. With a stroke of the pen, the leadership had created a technical nightmare and handed it to the medical experts responsible for carrying out the task. For the Politburo, the decision had been easy. For the medical team, it was an unbearable burden. At first, the original instructions were simple: preserve the body for about 15 days so that the public could pay their respects. Accordingly, the doctors applied only standard short-term embalming techniques. But when the sudden order arrived demanding permanent preservation, panic swept through the entire medical group. A single thought dominated their minds. They had to ensure that the body of the Red Sun remained perfectly intact. If anything went wrong, if the preservation failed or the body deteriorated, the consequences for everyone involved would be unimaginable. Under the dual pressures of extreme political scrutiny and a total lack of advanced technological support, the expert team made an extraordinarily bold, even reckless decision. They administered a supermaximal dose. They pumped an astonishing 22 liters of chemical preservative into the body, a quantity far beyond any medical standard. The effect was immediate, yet catastrophic. The body of Mao rapidly developed severe facial and systemic swelling, the skin stretched taut and translucent under the chemical infusion, its color taking on an uncanny hue, and the neck ballooned nearly to the thickness of the head itself. According to the later memoirs of Dr. Li Jisue, a core member of the medical team at the time, the scene was unbearable to witness. The supreme leader, once worshipped by hundreds of millions, had been grotesquely distorted by the overabundant preservative, his appearance rendered unrecognizable. Such a visage could not be presented for public viewing. With Sino-Soviet relations deteriorating, there was no Soviet technical support available, leaving China's team to rely on the most rudimentary, even harrowing methods. They brought soft towels soaked in warm water and alcohol, and with trembling hands, they performed an ultra-delicate, painstakingly slow microsculptural massage on Mao's face and neck. In a state of intense fear, they attempted to physically guide the excess preservative from under the skin into the deeper cavities of the chest and abdomen. The process was painstakingly long, every palm sweaty with the dread that the slightest error could cause irreversible damage. After a suffocating struggle, the swelling finally receded enough for the face to return to a condition suitable for public display. Once the initial crisis was survived and the public viewing concluded, a more secretive internal operation commenced. Mao's body was clandestinely transferred to an underground military air defense facility codenamed 769, where the medical team performed a complete internal preservation purge. All internal organs, the heart, liver, lungs, kidneys, and digestive tract, were removed and stored separately in highly classified containers, each immersed in formalin. The emptied cavities were then tightly packed with medical fibrous materials soaked in high-concentration preservative. Yet one organ was deliberately left intact: the brain. Within China's inscrutable political tradition, performing a cranial procedure on the supreme leader was considered an absolute taboo, a red line no one dared cross. Thus emerged a bizarre hybrid, a chemically preserved body retaining a fully intact brain, preserving the head as a symbol of absolute thought, while the rest of the form existed solely for public veneration. A party claiming unwavering materialist doctrine had resorted to a ritual reminiscent of ancient pharaohs in handling the remains of its leader. The final stage, crucial for deceiving human perception, was the creation of a lifelike appearance. Without access to Soviet expertise like Vietnam's Ho Chi Minh, China's scientists had to innovate on their own, eventually devising a so-called air-liquid combination method, essentially an optical illusion. The harsh truth is that in the crystal coffin, only the face and hands, the only parts meant for public exposure, were kept in a dry nitrogen environment, while the torso, covered by clothing, remained submerged in hidden preservative tanks. What gave the appearance of vitality was precisely calculated lighting. The reddish glow of Mao's face in the memorial hall was not the color of life but soft red light projected through advanced optical design. The lighting concealed the pale, chemically treated skin, making him appear to be peacefully asleep. This was high-level visual engineering, the apex of physics and optics, serving political symbolism. Looking beyond China, a global pattern of socialist leader preservation emerges. The tradition began with Lenin in 1924, setting the model for the world. Vietnam followed with Ho Chi Minh in 1969, benefiting from direct Soviet expertise, making his body arguably the best preserved globally. Mao entered this continuum in 1976, despite strained Sino-Soviet relations forcing domestic innovation. The operational logic mirrored Moscow's methods. The most exceptional cases were North Korea's Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, whose preservation required annual injections of hard currency to employ top Russian specialists. The tradition also contains darkly humorous failures. Stalin's body was preserved alongside Lenin for 8 years before Khrushchev's de-Stalinization campaign had him hastily removed and buried at the Kremlin's wall. In Czechoslovakia, President Gottwald, inspired by Soviet practices, attempted permanent preservation, but technical failures led to rapid decay in his crystal coffin, and the body was ultimately cremated to cover the political embarrassment. Throughout this secretive history, virtually every leader of self-proclaimed infallible socialist states underwent a highly ritualized preservation process after death. It was as if the regime feared that without this, the entire system built on absolute power would collapse instantly. This brings us to the core question: why? Why would regimes professing scientific materialism obsess over eternally preserving the corpses of their leaders? The motives reveal themselves across political, religious, and technological dimensions. Primarily, it was about preserving power and stability. In highly centralized autocracies, the leader's personal authority underpins the legitimacy of the entire political system. Retaining an immortalized body serves as a powerful symbolic reassurance, a signal to society that the highest authority remains unbroken. Secondly, it filled a spiritual void forcibly created by the destruction of traditional religion. Chemically preserved leaders became modern relics, and grand memorial halls became secular cathedrals where the public could express reverence, transforming political power into a quasi-religious experience. Lastly, it reinforced political narrative and propaganda, showcasing scientific mastery as an emblem of state omnipotence, a demonstration of humanity conquering nature and death itself. Decades have passed along Chang'an Avenue, yet Mao's body remains perfectly preserved in the heart of Tiananmen Square. Generations of spectators have come and gone, slogans and beliefs evolving with time. But one question lingers like a ghost over the memorial: when this long historical experiment ends, will the body be quietly removed like Stalin's, or will it remain at the nation's geographic and political center forever? Perhaps the answer no longer matters. For when we gaze into the abyss of history, it becomes clear that the entity most desperately resisting decay was never the pale body in the coffin, but the regime itself, terrified of time and truth. The material symbol it left behind often endures longer, and more ironically, than the beliefs it was meant to uphold. Today's program ends here. Thank you for watching, and feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on the bell, like, share, and follow so that history's truths and our voices can reach even further. Until next time.